Welcome, everybody, to the RotoWire NFL Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Nick Whalen. We're brought to you by Vivid Seats, RT Sports, and Chalkboard. We are grateful for their sponsorship. We're grateful for you for spending some time with us. We're grateful for football. Nick, I had this little plan that we're going to start off with injuries and all that. I got to start off actually with the the Monday night game. Sorry, I had a YouTube window open there, folks. Sorry if anybody heard that in the background. Let's talk about the Monday night game. I'm buzzing off that game still. Such a good game. Such a good game. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the thing is, I don't really have a dog in that fight. I even got it wrong. I thought Baltimore would win. They usually beat these teams at home like that. And I'm just so impressed with the way Detroit played. I thought Baltimore played mostly pretty well as well. But it was so fun watching. When Detroit's playing well, they're such a fun team.
Yeah, we're still at the evaluation point in the season, I think, for a lot of teams, including both of these teams, right? I mean, Detroit had shown us to date a dominant effort over Chicago, an ugly loss to Green Bay in week one, and you're kind of wondering, all right, which version of the Lions that we've seen so far is the true version? And I think we got our answer last night, Jeff. I think this might be the single most impressive win of the season that we've seen so far. And, obviously, as we get deeper, there will be games that top this. But going into Baltimore on a Monday night, Ravens always play well. Lamar always plays well in those situations. And I thought throughout, the Lions set the tone. First drive of the game, you march all the way down for a touchdown. You go for it on fourth down. They had a couple of those conversions throughout the game. And, I was texting with some buddies early on, and I'm like, some guys that I do the circuit contest with, and we're on the Ravens. And I'm like, all right, I still feel okay about this. Like, Detroit's offensive line's kind of getting pushed around. Lions aren't really running the ball all that effectively. I mean, the Ravens did do a pretty good job on Jahmyr Gibbs. He did not have a double-digit carry. He had 22 carries for 67 yards, 3 yards per carry. But as this game went along, I felt like the script kind of flipped. Like, Detroit became the more physical team. They were pushing the Ravens around for a lot of that second half, ripping off these long extended drives. David Montgomery had a couple of explosives. And, it's not going to show up in the stat sheet, Jeff. Jared Goff, this was like a below-average fantasy game for him, 20 of 28, 202, and a touchdown. I thought he was really, really good last night.
100%.
Really, really good. Wasn't sacked. That Detroit offensive line, which we still have some questions about, I thought for the most part held up. No Matabike, of course, for Baltimore, which was big. But I thought Goff was dialed in, and in a game where they really tried to establish the run, and until late in the game, weren't really having that much success doing so.
Yeah, he made all the throws he needed to, and including like the touchdown to Amon-Ra in the corner, and then of course the fourth down conversion at midfield to seal the game. Basically, that was such a pretty throw, dropping that in there. It's funny. Doing the rewatch of that game last night, there was a reaction by one of the guys on the Ravens sideline. It wasn't a player; it was a guy in a suit actually, and he kind of turns around like disgusted because he knows, that's it. What are we going to do about it? Can't do anything about this. And the funny thing is the Ravens defense has quietly not been so good this year, especially against the run. All three games, they've had some big running plays given up against them there. The offense has 111 points and they're somehow 1-2. Just think about that. It's just, and like things that they thought were a strength, like Roquan Smith, the middle linebacker. I don't think he's played very well so far this year.
I think on balance, he's been fine. Last night was not a good showing for Roquan Smith. I think he was kind of the culprit on a couple of those big plays in the second half. I mean, we've seen this from Baltimore's defense before, specifically last season where they were bad early and then, made some adjustments and were one of the best units in the NFL by the end of the season. And maybe we're going down that same path, but the Ravens, despite putting up points, despite putting up plenty of their own yardage, have been outgained in all three of these games so far. And it's one thing, I guess, to get outgained by Detroit and get outgained by Buffalo, but they were outgained by Cleveland even in week 2. And, part of it is the running game just has not been good. It was really effective for the first 3 quarters of that Buffalo game, but Derrick Henry was completely shut down against the Cleveland Browns and finished 12 for 50 against this Detroit team last night at a big run early in the game. It looked like, all right, here we go. Derrick Henry's back. This is going to be one of those nights for the Ravens. And it just wasn't. It really wasn't. And obviously the big fumble late in the game completely swung things. I mean, twice in 3 weeks now, we've seen Derrick Henry put the ball on the ground and lose a fumble. He did fumble last week, but the Ravens got it back. And I mean, the other thing I'll say about Detroit was I thought Lamar Jackson was extremely dialed in as a passer. This is one of his better accuracy games, made some really impressive throws, hitting guys on the sideline, hitting guys on the run, but they clamped down on Lamar Jackson, the runner, last night. And there were 2, 3, 4 times where you could see, Lamar thinks he has a lane, those type of runs that you see every single week where he shakes a tackle and all of a sudden he's scampering for 17 yards. And there was always a second defender there for the Detroit Lions to either trip him up or take him down from behind. I mean, Lamar was sacked 7 times. He's impossible to sack, Jeff. He was sacked 7 times, just the second time in his career that he's been sacked 7 times, and first time in like 5 years. So really, really impressive effort by the Detroit Lions. And with Green Bay losing to Cleveland, all of a sudden it feels like that division race is back on, and either of those teams could win the North.
100% agree. And let's not forget about Minnesota, who is now 2-1 as well, and has a Brian Flores coach defense. So anything can happen there too. Even the Bears look good albeit against Dallas. So, it's a little too early to get optimistic about the Bears, but I do think though that they fixed a lot of things. That the 2 young guards were getting a lot of love yesterday from the broadcast there. And obviously that's still a point of concern. And same as with center, not having Frank Ragnow, that's obviously still something you want to watch for, but hey, week 1 can be a lie. Week 2 can be a lie for that matter too, especially when you have big changes and you're trying to work them in. The Derrick Henry thing, the sequence that caught my eye was the goal line sequence in the second quarter. Now they eventually got a touchdown after the quick punt and drove it back down, got that touchdown before halftime. So it ultimately really didn't matter, but I thought it was just telling how it looked like Henry had lanes at first and they closed up in a hurry. They did this whole sprint to the line thing that was weird. It felt desperate.
It did. I think that's the exact right word. And we've seen Baltimore kind of get desperate in late game situations, but it felt like they were desperate earlier in this game. Even running the Derrick Henry, toss pass play in the red zone, which should have been intercepted, by the way. Like that is just such an obvious, like, hey, if it's not there, throw the ball away. And Derrick Henry's like rolling right, pump fakes, throws it anyway, and you're like, my goodness, man, like what? You're the Ravens. Like you line it up and run the ball. Like do what you do, or at least let Lamar do something. You have
that play's worked for them in the past, though. And I think
but it just wasn't there.
Addicted to it.
It wasn't there, and it's like to me, it just felt like there was no reason to get cute like that. It just felt it felt like they were in desperation mode when they didn't really need to be. Sure. And it sets up this crazy situation now, Jeff, where we have Ravens at Chiefs this week, and the Ravens are 3-point favorites. By the way, they were 2.5 last night, and even after losing, that number has moved toward Baltimore, which I think says a lot about the way the market views Kansas City. In all likelihood, barring a tie, one of those 2 teams, the Chiefs or the Ravens, is going to be sitting at 1-3. Wild. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that line is right. I think that's the way I'm leaning. I
agree.
I think Baltimore is the better team, and I'm not super worried about them. They have these nagging concerns, but they're the type of team that fixes nagging concerns. And I think their base is still good. They still scored 111 points. That still is there. I think they typically fix the things on the defensive side of the ball. Is there, could you say like, I wish we were a little bit better about that? Sure. Absolutely. I could see that there a little bit.
Yeah.
But it is one of those where I'm kind of looking at it like, they're good. And meanwhile, I didn't feel very good at all about the Chiefs coming out of that. We saw with the Chiefs that they won. Sure. They hit a couple of big throws. They got a big PI called at right before the half to get the extra field goal to go up 9-6 at halftime. That was just a throw it up there and pray sort of play. And that was like a 50-yard play.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. They didn't move the ball at all. I have real concerns about the Chiefs.
I was on the Giants plus 6.5 in that game and actually felt really good about it going in, which is crazy because you're going up against the Chiefs. And I underestimated the degree to which the Giants just can't do anything on offense. But I didn't feel like Kansas City made any sort of statement there in prime time, right? It's like, yeah, good. You got your first win of the season. But that to me was more about the Giants' incompetence than the Chiefs taking any sort of step forward. Even the big plays felt like desperation type of plays, and good on Tyquan Thornton for making a big reception down the field. But it looked a lot like the first couple of games. It looked a lot like last season where it's all on Mahomes, and if he's not moving around in the pocket, you're just not getting anything. The running game couldn't do anything. I've said all year, I think once Rashee Rice is back, we're going to see a better version of the Chiefs offense, but what is better at this point? Does that move them to becoming like, I don't know, the 12th best offense in the NFL? Like, I don't think the Chiefs of old are coming back anytime soon, but you get a healthy Rice, you get a healthy Worthy. I think that certainly does change things. There's just the personnel right now is brutal around Patrick Mahomes. The offensive line's not playing well. The pass catchers might be a bottom 5 to 6 group, maybe even lower, honestly, when you factor in who's out there right now. So I'm not surprised that the Chiefs struggled at all. I just expected a little bit more out of the Giants. And there is a reason now, Jeff, coming out of that game, and specifically coming out of that late goal line sequence where Russell Wilson just threw the ball out of bounds 3 times in 4 plays, that the Giants are now pivoting to Jaxson Dart.
Yep. I mentioned this on SiriusXM. We talked about this. I simultaneously think that's the right decision to make, and also think it's going to be really rough for Dart this week at home against the Chargers.
No question. But at the same time, I don't know if there's really a pocket of schedule for the Giants where you say,
Correct.
all right, here's like the nice 2 or 3 game stretch where we can ease them in. It's like you do get the Saints on the road in week 5. And to me, I guess it would make slightly more sense to start him there, but maybe they did want to start him at home. I mean, we saw the reception that Jaxson Dart was getting every time he came on the field for those design package plays, even though it was obvious he was either just going to keep it or hand it off. Like the Giants fans are fired up to see this guy, and they are done with Russell Wilson. That much was very clear. And I think Brian Dable was done with Russell Wilson. I thought he would at least last like 6 or 7 games.
Yeah.
And eventually they would pull the plug. But I think the seeds were planted in week 1. Honestly, the way Wilson played in that game against the Commanders, and then he saved his job for a week going up against that terrible Cowboys defense. But this was an atrocious Russell Wilson game. And, you're 0-3 if you're the Giants. And if you're Brian Dable, you're in survival mode as a head coach. And I think your path to doing that with Russell Wilson just wasn't there. And I think now you can at least sell yourself. You could sell the organization on, all right, we got our guy in Jaxson Dart. If I can make him look good, even if we're not winning a ton of games, we don't want to be that team that drafts the high quarterback and then immediately changes the coaching staff and sets him back like we've seen happen with so many teams over these last few years. So I am fully on board with this, to be honest. I don't think it could be a whole lot worse. Like whatever game managing Russell Wilson was selling you on, I didn't see it. I think week 2 was, to me, so much more about the Cowboys defense, which obviously looked even worse against Caleb Williams this last week.
Yeah. A lot of changes in New York. It's also, Tyrone Tracy out 2 to 3 weeks with his shoulder injury. So it's Scatterbo time, and it already was Scatterbo time, but now it's Scatterbo and Singletary as opposed to Scatterbo and Tracy. Yeah. One thing about Dart is he is, Russ has scramble mobility, but he doesn't have like planned run, called run mobility, and Dart does. So that should help Scatterbo. And in fact, it did in the game when they had the Dart packages. That was the thing they had. It opened up running lanes for Scatterbo. So I suspect that'll be good for him. So we'll see about that. But yeah, they face the Chargers, really tough spot. The Chargers are good, really good defensively. I think they're also really good offensively. I'm kind of curious to see this. I know it opened at 6, and I think it's already moved up to 6.5 in favor of the Chargers on the road. That's a big number to lay, but here we are.
Yeah, it was 5.5 yesterday, now up to 6.5, and I think he probably rolled with the Chargers here. I mean, there might be a little bit of a Dart bump, right? I would imagine that this is a popular decision internally with the roster too. I don't know that Russell Wilson has made a ton of pals at this point in his career, and again, I don't think it could be a whole lot worse. That Cowboys game notwithstanding. So to me, it's kind of like a no change for Malik Neighbors. He's really the guy we're most concerned about in this offense. Scatterbo, I think you laid out a case for why this could help him a little bit. And I know we talked on XM about the deep balls maybe dry up. Malik Neighbors, to me, not really like he could catch the deep ball. He's capable of that, but that's not really what he makes his bones on, right? I mean, that's not how he became the receiver that he was last season. He only had 2 catches of over 40 yards a year ago. So yeah, maybe you missed the moon balls, but I think you're gaining more just in terms of offensive competency with Jaxson Dart. And even if he comes out and looks bad, which is my expectation this week against the Chargers, terrible spot, even though you're at home, most rookie quarterbacks, I don't care who you are, you're going to struggle in your first NFL start. But I think there's at least hope of, some sort of organizational progress here for the Giants. And, even 3 games into the season, you just felt like this was going to be a train wreck if they stuck with Russell Wilson.
Yep. And signing Winston before that, I think Winston and Dart as a combo would have been sufficient. Winston could have been the keep the seat warm guy, and you could have gotten this similar results, I think, at this point in time in their respective careers. So it didn't make sense to have all 3. If you're an enterprising team that has lost your quarterback, let's call them the Bengals, for instance, there, and your backup isn't as good as you might have thought he was, do you consider trading for Winston or for Russell Wilson? Is this something you would do? Can I interest you in this?
Not really. I mean, I'm just so out on Russ. I'm not a Russ guy. There's probably something to be said about him giving you a higher baseline when you have the weapons that you do in Cincinnati. Is there really that big of a difference between Browning and Winston? I don't know. Browning kind of has some Jameis in him. I like if the Bengals traded for Jameis Winston today, I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, Bengals, we're back on, baby. They're making the playoffs. I would be like, all right, I'm interested, but I don't think we would see like a market change in their futures markets and their line for this week or anything like that. So
yeah, it would take them a long time to kind of get acclimated to a new playbook system and all that.
Yeah, Jameis is so mistake prone that, and it's become a meme obviously over the last couple of years. It's like, yeah, you take the good with the bad, but the bad is going to outweigh the good on balance here. And I think if anything, maybe you want to add some depth behind Jake Browning in case he goes down and you don't have to resort to Brett Rippon. Like that would be the case for me, but yeah. I wouldn't trade for either of those guys with the expectation that they're my starter right away.
I agree. Just I've heard it floated out there. I wanted to get your take on that. This podcast is brought to you by Vivid Seats. NFL is back. Don't just sit on the couch. Lock in your seat this season with the Vivid Seats app, where you'll score the lowest price tickets guaranteed. That's right. Vivid Seats is introducing their new lowest price guarantee, so you know you're getting the best deal all season long. Seriously, try to find a cheaper ticket, and good luck. Every rushing yard, red zone pass, and jaw-dropping play of your favorite team, live and in person. And here's the kicker. When you buy with the Vivid Seats app, you rack up rewards and free credits. That's your personal home field advantage. And if that wasn't enough, Vivid Seats is offering you $20 off your first $200 ticket purchase with code RotoWire. That's code RotoWire, RotoWire. So suit up this NFL season and download the Vivid Seats app to get the best deal in the game with the best prices. Terms apply, as they always do. We're back talking a little NFL injuries. Let's talk a little bit about CeeDee Lamb. Biggest injury, big zero for us fantasy-wise. Got hurt early in this game and didn't come back. Now it's been declared a high ankle sprain. We're looking at a 3 to 4 week absence with him.
I lost a fantasy matchup this week, Jeff, to a guy who was starting CeeDee Lamb and took the zero. That if you want to know how my Drake London, Brian Thomas team is doing, that's a pretty good indication. Yeah, this is brutal for Dallas. I mean, I really like the Cowboys in that Chicago game and just could not have been more wrong. Now, we had the fumble on the fourth play of the game. Javonte Williams just gets the ball literally taken away from him by Tyreek Stevenson. That, just set off a terrible sequence of events for the Cowboys where the Bears go down and score. CeeDee Lamb, his ankle turns completely the wrong way. I mean, in a lot of ways, lucky to avoid a much more major injury. And he's not going to go on IR. I know he initially said, I think I'm going to play this week. He's not playing this week against Green Bay. There's no way. I think this is looking at, probably a 2 to 3 week type of injury. So if we assume he's out week 4, you got the Jets in week 5 and then Carolina the game after. Dallas, it's not completely devoid of weapons. You lose CeeDee Lamb. It's a top heavy roster. It's going to be tough to win any game, but it just felt like as soon as that happened, the Cowboys had nothing, and I thought they were moving the ball pretty effectively on the ground. I thought Javonte Williams looked pretty good early in this game. There's a notable drop off, by the way, between he and Miles Sanders. It's
I agree.
Stark. There were some brutal carries for Miles Sanders in the first half. And, we saw George Pickens, we saw Jake Ferguson go wild without CeeDee Lamb, but it just felt like the offense kind of decided well, we don't have CeeDee Lamb. I guess we can't really do anything, which was a little bit concerning. So you take Lamb out of the mix. One, I think this is a smash spot for the Green Bay Packers this week. You're going up against what might be the worst defense in the NFL. You got kind of revenge on your mind after this brutal loss to the Cleveland Browns. And, the Cowboys have other injuries. They're still without their starting center. He's going to be out a couple of months. You lost your starting right guard, Tyler Booker, as well. Bad. They have injuries on the defensive side. Kenny Clark left this game. You have injuries to Deron Bland, to Trayvon Diggs. So this season feels like it's getting away from the Dallas Cowboys already. If they had been able to steal that win against Philly in week 1, maybe I'd feel a little bit differently. I still think the offense with a healthy CeeDee Lamb could be really good. That running game's been better than I expected, but it's going to be an uphill battle these next couple of weeks. And, I think Jalen Tolbert becomes somebody who is at least somewhat appealing on the waiver wire. Hopefully you have enough receiver depth that you don't have to draft him or start him, I should say. But we did see him kind of step right into that CeeDee Lamb role after CeeDee went out.
Yeah, absolutely. We did. And the offensive line issues are part of the reason why it holds me back from being too crazy about Tolbert, because, is he going to have enough time to get separation? He went 3 on 6 targets for just 24 yards. No big plays there. He's been a guy that's, a target in the red zone before. In the past, he actually led the Cowboys in receiving touchdowns last year. But, how much upside is there going to be there? That is the question. And there was a comment in here earlier asking about George Pickens. Can he be a number one? Or maybe that was on Twitter. I got that actually. And I think Pickens will have some number one quality games, but it won't be on the regular. It'll be one of those where he hits a couple of big plays, and that's a good day. Against the better matchups, he'll be okay. Against the worst matchups, he might backslide pretty bad.
Yeah, well, and this was a good matchup. Like the Bears defense is not good. And I think you come out of this game and you're like, oh, all right, Chicago making some progress. Like, despite playing a pretty bad game overall, Dallas still outgained the Bears. They still put up 396 yards of offense. They were at about 6 yards per play. Like the Dallas defense lost them this game. They struggled in the red zone. They were 104 there. So like this could have gone a little bit differently. I think if CeeDee ends up playing in this game, it's much, much closer. I don't know if Dallas wins, but it's a different ball game. It was alarming to me how much they relied on Ferguson. Like even right after CeeDee Lamb went out, there were a couple like 3rd and longs, and they're just dumping it down to Jake Ferguson. Like it was like a punt essentially on 3rd down.
Yep.
Like, yeah, we're just admitting we have no chance to pick this up. As far as Pickens goes, yeah, I think you framed it well. Like sometime if CeeDee Lamb misses the next 3 games, there'll probably be a 20+ point fantasy point week in there for George Pickens. Is he going to do it every week? I don't know. That we saw, some back and forth with Pickens on the sideline. I think those underlying issues are still there. Like in theory, this should be a really nice, kind of mini run for him. But I still think that Packers defense is really good. So I don't see I don't see a ton there in week 4, but Jets, Panthers, those next 2 games, if CeeDee's out for those, those could be big spots for Pickens.
Yeah, agreed. Comment in the chat that I wanted to mention real quick, highlight. Look, Lord King Guru said that CeeDee is in 65% of his best ball matchups. And first of all, sympathies to you, but this is a good illustration why it's good to differentiate when you're, especially among your elite players. You don't really want to be that heavy just because one player can sink your season if he gets hurt like that too.
That's true. I mean, the injury part of it is obviously really tough, and it's going to happen to a handful of elite players every year. This does kind of bring me to a wider point though, Jeff, of what early round receiver right now outside of Puka Nacua, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and we'll call JSN an early round receiver. We'll say like top 3-4 rounds. Yeah, so he's in there. Yeah. Like how many of those guys are you like thrilled to have a ton of exposure to right now? It's not that many. No,
it isn't. It really isn't. And I think early season, judging the season by the first couple of weeks is probably problematic, but I thought it's just pulling up like the primetime ADP, just looking at wide receivers is a good way of kind of going about doing this here. Lamb now is a disaster. Jefferson, you're kind of lukewarm. No, you're not even lukewarm about. You're unhappy about so far. You're happy you have him.
Right.
Neighbors has had one stinker of a game. He also has a bad shoulder. He got hurt in that game against Kansas City a little bit. We'll see. Brian Thomas, average pick 8 in the primetime drafts. Yikes. Amon-Ra, you're thrilled with. Yeah. Nico, you're probably okay with a bad week 1, but he's been fine since. Puka, you're fine with. London, you're not happy with. Lad McConkey has been AJ Brown, a lot of existential angst that got erased in the second half against the Rams. We'll see if it carries forward.
Yeah.
Higgins has been ruined, though, because of the quarterback problem.
Right.
Garrett Wilson, you've been okay with. 2 out of 3 games have been pretty good, actually. Tet McMillan, I heard complaints about Tet, and I thought Tet was fine so far. In fact, I think Tet is really good. I've been impressed by how he looks. So,
well, I think there's been a disconnect between how he's looked and what the fantasy production has been. Like you see the highlight plays, like he absolutely looks the part. Like I think he's going to be a great player, but he's put up 11.8, 16, and 7.8 fantasy points so far. So it hasn't really translated to fantasy quite yet. And you do bring up a very valid point here, Jeff, which is that we are 3 weeks into the season, and we'll look back in a couple weeks and probably say that this was a dumb conversation, but it's just anecdotally, it feels like more of these guys are struggling than ever. And, like London to me, I mean, I'm not going to trade him. I'm not going to drop him. That's for sure. But this is now 3 just very, very pedestrian weeks in a row. I mean, we don't have to go in on Brian Thomas. I think we know what's going on there. And, Terry McLaurin is now banged up. He hasn't scored more than 10.4 fantasy points so far this year. You mentioned the Bengals guys, like Jamar Chase ranks higher than you'd expect because of the huge game in week 2, but he's put up, 2 just nothing burgers outside of that. I mean, it says a lot right now that you look at the top 10 receivers in fantasy and like Rome Odunze, wide receiver 3, Trey Tucker is wide receiver 4, Keenan Allen, wide receiver 6. And Emeka Ibuka, wide receiver 10. Yeah, that makes sense. But like Ibuka is still being carried by that week 1 game. Like there's so few players that have had like 3 solid games so far.
Right. Exactly. So this happens every year, by the way.
Yeah.
And I will say it happens more now. I think it does, at least, that I think the passing numbers are down. The 2 deep shell thing is just, it's a real thing. It is kind of ruining a lot of our fun in fantasy football for wide receivers. All right, we could go down that rabbit hole for way longer than we are right now, but we won't, because we got lots of other injuries to deal with there. Mike Evans out 2 to 3 weeks with a hamstring injury.
Yep.
They might get Chris Godwin back, but say if you have Ibuka, definitely, I'm not looking to sell him. I wasn't looking to sell him anyhow, just because I think it's a genie out of the bottle thing. I think he's too good to not get his reps. But now with Evans hurt too, I mean, I don't anticipate a drop off from Ibuka.
Yeah, the Evans thing, kind of lines up perfectly, right? Where it's like, all right, Godwin could be back, and then you'd have this issue of 3 really good receivers. But now if Mike Evans is out for 2 to 4 games, then that window is still very much open. And I think you're right on Ibuka. I mean, you talk about a guy who's passed the eye test, a guy who's put up good numbers. Like I think he is here to stay. Like he is somebody that prior to the Evans injury, I thought, because I have some teams where I have just a loaded receiver room, including Ibuka, because of where he was going in some of my home leagues, where it's like, all right, he's somebody I would put on the table to package with maybe another wide receiver and do a 2-for-1 and try to land one of the big fish. But I'm now terrified to do that, because there's going to be 2 or 3 weeks here where I think he could really go off. And even if Godwin's back this week, what kind of snap share does he see? How does that ankle look? How long is it until he's fully back up to speed? The thing that does worry me, though, about Tampa Bay, Jeff, is this offensive line, which I know you have thoughts on.
I do. They watching the rewatch of that game against the Jets, first drive, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 holding penalties against that offensive line in 1 series. Ridiculous. It was very tantamount to the Giants Dallas first series there, where the Giants had 120 yards of offense on 1 drive because of all the penalties. I think that they're going to really struggle against this Eagles front. Caveat is if Tristan Wirfs comes back, that obviously changes matters significantly. That is one thing that will help them quite a bit. But that, first of all, we don't know what sort of form we're going to get out of him. We don't know what form we're going to, if he's actually going to come back. This one's going to come down to the wire, but their entire right side of their offensive line is done for the year. So that's a tough look right there. They've had their center playing left tackle. That's a tough look. That's really tough to get to pull off there. But they've been doing it. But man, it's really tough to do.
Yeah, this sounds crazy to say right now, but I think the door is still open for Atlanta in that division, Jeff. And we need to see the Falcons actually play well after just getting beat down by Carolina this past week. Didn't even reach the red zone, by the way, at any point in that game. But it's not just the Eagles this week. I mean, Tampa Bay then goes to Seattle. You get the Niners and then the Lions over your next 4 games. So things really do pick up here schedule-wise. As much respect as I have for Baker Mayfield, which is a ton because he's been incredible in these late game situations, the Buccaneers are incredibly lucky to be 3-0. I mean, you win on a missed field goal at the buzzer in week 1. You score with 6 seconds on the clock in week 2 against the Texans. And then you have this, this crazy come from behind win once again when a walk-off field goal in week 3 against the Jets. Now you could argue it never should have come to that. Tampa Bay was up multiple scores late in the game. You have that fluky block return for a touchdown. I get all that. Not necessarily trying to take anything away from Tampa Bay, but this is essentially 3 walk-off wins in 3 games.
It is. And, all preseason long when Wirfs got hurt, I was sounding the alarm on the win total for Tampa Bay. Kind of back to, I'm doing the Homer Simpson back into the bushes thing here with that one right now, because that's looking pretty good now all of a sudden, because I thought they'd lose to Houston. I thought they potentially could lose to Atlanta in week 1. And they didn't. And well, as you alluded to, it came really close in all these games, but I think Philly gets them this week. As far as Atlanta goes, Michael Penix was hideous in this game. Hideous. You look hideous. But I know you sound hideous in the commercial, but whatever. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. The play calling was a problem too. And maybe it's just because he didn't have time to throw downfield. Maybe he went through the progressions, said, I can't do this. He used to be a guy that was always chucking it. Yes, he wasn't the most accurate quarterback, but he had the bravery to throw downfield. He had the target London on the regular. That is gone. It's so many checkdowns now, and they're bad checkdowns.
Well, what we're failing to mention here is that the Atlanta Falcons have solved this, Jeff, because they're going to move their offensive coordinator from the booth down to the sideline.
Yes.
So that was the problem. Is
Fired
that
the wide receiver coach
he was too high up and couldn't get the plays in. So yeah, I mean this was the most shocking result of the season for me. Obviously the Browns beat the Packers this past week. That was surprising, but the Falcons were I think 6-point favorites in some markets and didn't score a point against the Carolina Panthers. Like it's one thing to lose this game. It's another thing to just never compete with a team that I thought might be the worst in the NFL coming into this week. I know you're on the road. I know Raheem Morris has always struggled in these situations as a road favorite, all that. But like, again, it's acceptable to lose this game. It's not acceptable to lose 30-0 to the Panthers. And Penix felt like he took a huge step back. This was easily by a mile the worst game of his career, 12.5 QBR. By the way, for Penix, threw a brutal interception that probably should have been returned for a touchdown late in the game. And, the thing is, like, Atlanta was moving the ball effectively on the ground and just didn't really accept that was enough. Like, they kept trying to push the ball downfield. They kept trying to put things on Penix, which in theory you should be able to do against the Panthers, but he just didn't have it. Like, there was no confidence. He wasn't making the right decisions. He wasn't making the right reads. And, despite Bijan Robinson giving you 5.5 yards per carry, they could not get anything going in that passing game. So, like, I think Penix will be better by default. There's nowhere to go but up after a game like this, but I'm very, very concerned about my Falcons' interest, and I'm getting pretty concerned about Drake London, man.
I am too. I have a lot of exposure to both London and Penix, and like in all my super flex leagues, I've got Penix, and I still think there's plenty of reason for hope. And keep in mind, he played 3 games in pretty favorable conditions last year. The only one of those that might be arguably not favorable was the road game at Washington on Sunday night. Yeah. And even that, Washington wasn't like a killer defense last year. They get them again this week. Washington's actually a road favorite. We don't even know if Daniels is going to play, and they're still like a road favorite in this one, which I found pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that line implies that Daniels will be back. Part of it too is, maybe just some reaction to how terrible the Falcons were this past week. And it's tough. I mean, the Falcons have just played 3 dramatically different games where, it's like, I kind of like what I saw in week 1, even though they lost and the offense kind of got bogged down. I think the defense on balance has played pretty well, giving up 30 to the Panthers. That's tough, but obviously we're put in a ton of bad positions in that game. And then you have the weird game against Minnesota in week 2, which looks like a decent win, but you just didn't have to do anything offensively. Like they didn't ask Penix to do anything. They were able to just run the ball and kind of run out the clock on a Vikings team that was totally inept on offense. So like I really like the development from the defense overall, but you can't win games in the NFL with Penix playing like he has. And I don't know what happened. I know it was a small sample, very small sample at the end of last season, and maybe I read too much into that, but I thought this was going to be wheels up for Drake London this year, and it just hasn't. Yeah,
it really hasn't. And not the end of the first, beginning of the second round player. In some leagues, I was like, hey, I can't believe they gave him to me at the end of the second round. Oh, I was the sucker in that one there. You look around the table, you can't find the sucker. Yeah. The sucker is you, apparently.
Well, let me ask you this. Would you rather have Drake London or Brian Thomas going forward?
Brian Thomas, but because I trust more volume is going to be there. And I understand you're coming at this, you treat this personal.
This is a malicious question
here. Yeah. But I do think that Thomas is going to be okay. I get it that Lawrence and him haven't really clicked, and most of it, he got a lot more clicking with Mac Jones, for crying out loud, than he did with Lawrence, but I still think it's there. I think the ability is still there. We've seen it before. I think it comes back. I would pursue Brian Thomas Jr.
Okay. What if I gave you Marvin Harrison as part of this? Is he third for you?
Yes.
Okay. I think so too.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Kyler issue too. I don't trust Kyler as a passer ever. I just don't. And I think in the places where I have Marvin in like a dynasty league, I'm not cutting him or anything or benching him even, but he at some point the question's going to come up.
I think it already has. I mean, this was another pretty alarming game for Harrison, for the Cardinals. I'm not surprised this was lower scoring. These Cardinals-Niners games, especially with how Arizona has looked offensively and backup quarterback for the Niners, you kind of figured this would be ugly. But this is like 3 pretty ugly games now for the Cardinals offense where you get a defensive score in that Carolina game. You hang on to barely win against the Saints where you only scored 20 points. Like this offense is just, it's been stuck for 2+ years now, and now you're without James Conner for the rest of the season, which we should mention, by the way. It's almost one of those like fantasy automatics where it's like, yes, James Conner is out. Everybody knows it's Trey Benson. He's probably not available in your league. Maybe he is. Double check the waiver wire. So we'll see if that changes anything. I don't think it does. Like I like Trey Benson, but I don't think we're going to see all of a sudden like a supercharged version of this running game without James Conner. It's just, the passing game to me every week, you look at the box score and it's like the same thing. It's like, all right, 7 or 8 targets for Trey McBride, 5 or 6 for Harrison, 1 to 2 for some of these secondary pass catchers. Just no explosion, nothing after the catch. I don't like what I've seen. I think the Cardinals are lucky to be 2-1.
Agreed. And yet I find them being a home dog on Thursday night enticing. That's a different podcast, but it's all about their defense, which I do buy into. But they saw their offense last year, saw it was mid, and decided to do nothing. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised at the results. Nothing has changed. Nothing. You're just counting on internal improvement, and that's always like, oh yeah, we can make him better. Well, why didn't you do it before? I don't see any reason why we should have believed in that there. All right. We are brought to you by the good folks at Chalkboard. So let's share what they have to say. Chalkboard is, you can cash in on your NFL picks this season with Chalkboard. Simply choose more or less on your favorite player stats to win up to 5,000 times your money. For a limited time only, new players get $20 free with no deposit required. Yes, you heard that right. $20 free just on sign up. See why over 1 million fans have already locked in with Chalkboard to turn their sports knowledge into cold hard cash. Whether you're locking in the perfect slip with alternate lines, using the cash out feature to take your money and run, or hammering the daily promos, today is your chance to win up to $40,000 on a single entry. Stop sitting on the sidelines and get into the game with Chalkboard Fantasy Sports. Now available in 30+ states. Download Chalkboard today. Use promo code ROTONFL. That's ROTONFL to get $20 free with no deposit required. Thank you, Chalkboard, for your sponsorship. What is the best game for this upcoming week 4, and why is it Colts-Rams?
Why is it Colts-Rams? That's a very good question. I think it's because of the Colts, right? I mean, and any game the Rams play against a decent team, it's going to be a good game because we respect the Rams. Nobody had this circled as maybe the second best game of the week. I think we still have to give that to Ravens-Chiefs, even if it's the 1-2 bowl at Arrowhead this week. But I'm a lot more excited to watch Colts-Rams. I think this might be the most aesthetically pleasing game on the slate. I'm scrolling, trying to find if there's anything even close. I mean, I think we'll get a lot of points in Packers-Cowboys, but I could also see that being ugly for Dallas. Yeah, I mean, this is the ultimate prove-it game, I think, for Indianapolis, because for as great as they've looked, you see these like charts that are flying around Twitter all the time where you got, like every team is like mapped out somewhere. It's like the Colts are like just in the best possible spot in all these. Daniel Jones looks fantastic, but I think you could still, if you want to, poke holes in each of these games, right? Against the Dolphins, you're like, well, it's the Dolphins, and they were horrible in that game. They haven't looked any better. You play the Titans this week. They are maybe the worst team in the NFL. And, even that Broncos game, I'm impressed. I don't have much to say about that one. Colts put up 473 yards of offense on the Broncos defense, but you had the controversial field goal at the end, and a lot of people will say, Denver should have won that game, and we'd be talking differently about the Colts. I don't really buy into that, man. I think this is pretty real, and this will easily be their toughest test on the road at the LA Rams. Rams coming off of this just bizarre, brutal loss to the Eagles. I think they'll be fired up for this game. If the Colts win this one, Jeff, I think we are talking about this team in a completely different light. And right now they are in the driver's seat to win the AFC South, and they'll take some losses at some point here. They'll get tripped up in spots they shouldn't get tripped up. But this has been really, really impressive. Does it remind you at all of like how we started to talk about the Vikings this time last year when we started to realize, okay, maybe the Sam Darnold thing is real?
Yeah, it does. I think that's a good comparison point. Colts have a lot of good pass catchers. Maybe not, they don't have one elite one, but they've got 5 very good ones, or 3 or 4 very good ones, and one that's got potential in AD Mitchell. But I mean, I like Pittman. I like Downs. I like Pierce, and of course, Warren's looking great so far. And the guy that's loving life the most has to be Jonathan Taylor. He's seeing all these wide open lanes. He's healthy. He's got on a good team. He's got positive scripts. They're playing with the lead a lot. He's finishing off games. That touchdown run where he broke down like 4 tackles. Oh, that was vintage Wisconsin level Jonathan Taylor there.
Yeah, our buddy Scott Pianowski from Yahoo, on the show earlier today, offhandedly mentioned like, if you're redrafting right now, Jonathan Taylor is probably the 1-1. And initially I was like, that seems a little crazy. I don't think it's crazy at all. Like, would he be the 1-1 if you were drafting right now, knowing what we know now going forward? How many guys would you take over JT?
That's a really good question. And
right. There are candidates, right? Like Gibbs, McCaffrey. I think they're in the mix.
Yeah.
Maybe St. Brown or Nakua.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big 3 running backs are all still in the equation.
Yeah, Bijan's still in the mix for sure.
Yeah.
Saquon's still in the mix.
I think Chase isn't that far off either, by the way. I wouldn't discount Chase that much.
Yeah, I mean, we did see the one big game was mostly with Jake Browning, so I think that's fair as well. But yeah, the bottom line is Jonathan Taylor's going in the top 5 if you're redrafting right now. And like, to me, we talk so much about that Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams zone of running backs. And it was always like, I'll take Jonathan Taylor. I'm not really excited. It's the Colts. That offense is probably going to be really bad. And man, if you just kind of fell backwards into Jonathan Taylor this year, like a lot of people did, what a windfall that has been.
Yeah. It has. It really has. I have Taylor like in one league where I got him as I had him as a keeper, as a 7th round keeper. It was awesome because it was the year, remember, he was hurt and holding out and all that. So, that one I'm obviously doing really well. A couple other leagues where, you could get him in the 2nd round, and that was a beautiful thing. It turns out you could get him at the end of the 2nd round in some drafts. That had to be just so nice there. But meanwhile, the Rams, they lost a thriller to the Eagles. I think they may have been the better team in that game, but they found a way to lose that game. The Eagles did a lot, in fairness to the Eagles, they woke up, they discovered AJ Brown is good at football, and they got the ball to him a lot. They came up clutch in big moments, a lot of 4th downs in their favor, both offense and defense, and of course the blocks. But man, the Rams had this game. They just lost it.
Yeah, it's definitely a combination of the Rams finding a way to lose, but I think it's more the Eagles just clawing this game away, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, the Rams did not score for the final 29 minutes of this game. They went up 26-7, less than a minute into the 3rd quarter, didn't score the rest of the way. After that touchdown, they go punt, they go out on downs, block field goal, and then, of course, the second block field goal. So part of it was Philly finally being able to sustain drives because the Rams didn't really have that many opportunities to score in the second half. Right after they go down 26-7, Philly puts together a touchdown drive. Then it's a 13-play, 87-yard, 6.5-minute touchdown drive. It still looked like to me the Rams are going to pull out this game after the back-to-back failed 4th downs. The Rams go out on downs, and then Philly, kind of pressing a little bit. They go forward in a 4th and longer type of situation. And, the Rams just couldn't finish drives really in the second half. They were able to consistently move the ball, but, started to tighten up a little bit, started to play a little bit more conservatively. It still put up over 350 yards of offense on the Eagles defense. They held Philly under 300 yards. It was the worst offensive first half that the Eagles have had in a decade. They were at like 1.1 yards per play in the first half. I think it was 22 plays for 33 yards, which is outrageously bad. But I don't look at this as, oh my goodness, I can't believe the Rams blew this. This was Philly being Philly. This was reminding everybody that, yes, we can indeed throw the ball when we have to. We still have 2 elite wide receivers. We could throw to Devontae Smith on a gotta-have-it 4th down late in the game, and we trust that guy to bring it down. And I thought in the second half, Jeff, for as good as Puka was, Devontae made some plays early on. AJ Brown was the best player on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. He was bullying those corners. Absolutely bullying them. Anytime he got single coverage, it was like must target situation there. It just would have been nice that they remembered he existed earlier. Just think if you had the free look and you drafted like I did in the NFFC primetime on that Saturday after the Thursday game, people got AJ Brown in the 4th round in those drafts.
Yep.
Now, how good is that looking?
Well, I think that's a big question, right? Because this is great. AJ Brown kind of swooped in to save his fantasy value, but do we trust that this will be the case going forward? I guess because we've still seen like 8 quarters of AJ Brown, or 10 quarters, I should say, of AJ Brown, like really not doing anything So
Yeah.
how real is the second half of this game versus the first 10 quarters of the year when he basically gave you like 3.5 combined fantasy points?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think it's similar to last year where it was real for a while. Again, I think there'll be games where it's just a feature. I mean, when they can run the ball as effectively as they can at times, there's going to be games like this. And that's the thing. Like, they ran the ball very well against Dallas. So I think that was one of the reasons why you saw so little of it there. Against the Chiefs, I was disappointed. I thought they were going to have to throw more.
Yeah.
They just squeezed the life out of that game. It was not an enjoyable watch whatsoever.
Yeah.
I think there'll be more good days than bad days with Brown going forward there. Yeah. And I think against the Bucs, a team that's tough to run the ball against, I think you're going to see more of the same this upcoming week.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say the same thing. I mean, top 10 in EPA per rush defensively are the Buccaneers. Everybody that's tried to run at Vita Vea so far this year has had no success doing that. So I don't think they'll struggle to the same degree that we saw early in this game against the Rams, where it just could not get anything going. Like, they'll be able to move the ball on Tampa Bay, but I don't think this is one of those like huge smash spots for Saquon. I think they will have to open things up a little bit more. And maybe long-term, this is good, like the way that this game played out, because it almost did feel like there was like a stubbornness with Sirianni of like, oh, you guys think we have to throw? We'll show you. No, we don't. And, much like last year, there were a couple of games like this too, where it was kind of like the Eagles had to like reprove to themselves that this is actually a part of the offense.
Exactly right. Got one more game I want to talk about. I want to talk about the Ireland game, Minnesota and Pittsburgh. But before we do that, note from RT Sports, the NFL season is here, and the best place to play DFS Pick'em is RT Sports. Download the brand new RT Sports Pick'em app now. Receive your 100% deposit match bonus up to $100 in bonus funds with promo code WIRE100. RT Sports offers unique ways to earn bonus funds, such as every time you share your entry slip on X, you get $5 of bonus funds on RT Sports. Or if you sync your bank account, you get bonus funds. Also, RT Sports offers weekly free square options on the app with player lines slashed at 0.5 total yards. Download the RT Sports Pick'em app today and use promo code WIRE100 to get 100% deposit up to $100 in bonus funds. Thank you to RT Sports. Jeff Erickson here with Nick Whalen. We got the first of our many European games this week. We got Minnesota against Pittsburgh in Dublin. Both teams 2-1. Weird circumstances in getting there for both of them there. The Vikings romped against the Bengals, and the single two worst minutes of Bengals history, I think. They went from 17-3 to 34-3, just like that. And the game was completely over. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh got outgained, outplayed, somehow won against the Pats because they forced 5 turnovers.
Yeah, two very, very similar games in terms of one side completely giving the game away. The Vikings were able to capitalize on that significantly more than the Steelers were. I mean, this was over by halftime, right? Minnesota tacked on one more score right before the half, 34-3. Cincinnati ends with 3 lost fumbles, 2 interceptions. Isaiah Rodgers has the game of his life. Like, not a whole lot to say there. Kind of made it tough to evaluate Carson Wentz because there was just like zero adversity at any point for him. But I thought, passed the eye test, right? 14 of 20, 173, a couple of touchdowns. Jordan Mason, 16 for 166, 2 touchdowns. I think that was exactly the type of starting debut that you wanted from him. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, they win against New England. Probably should have lost this game by multiple scores, if we're being honest. I mean, New England, my goodness, man, 5 total turnovers, 4 fumbles lost. Drake May threw a brutal interception in the end zone that took points off the board. Ramondre Stevenson fumbles at like the 0.001 inch line before getting into the end zone. Ramondre fumbles again. Antonio Gibson fumbles again. Drake May had a strip sack. Like, it was just a comedy of errors for the Patriots, who outgained the Steelers 369-203. Like, New England was moving the ball all day. They were not necessarily generating these big chunk plays, but methodical drives down the field. I still don't really feel that much better about the Steelers defense. And like, all of those turnovers were kind of self-inflicted, right? Like, these were not like incredible defensive plays by the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was just the Patriots completely falling asleep and not taking care of the ball. So that makes us a really tough game to evaluate because, yes, the Steelers are 2-1. I still feel like they're kind of fraudulent right now. I don't really buy in on this defense. They were very lucky to beat the Jets in week 1, kind of got smacked by Seattle in week 2, and then you get the 5 turnovers in week 3. And I don't know how to value this game because I think Minnesota might come in now a little bit overvalued when you're gonna have a lot of people just looking at that final score, hyping up the defense. And you watch that game as close as anybody. so much of that was also self-inflicted by Cincinnati.
It was indeed. Isaiah Rodgers did have himself, or no, not Isaiah Rodgers, but the Rodgers for
Isaiah
it
Rodgers.
was Isaiah Rodgers. I was right. For some reason, I thought it was his first name, but it was Isaiah. Isaiah Rodgers had himself a day. The strip sack, the pick six, and then had another strip on Jamar Chase. I mean, the strip six, I should say, not the strip sack. Many strips involved here. Where's my mind going? But Rodgers had himself an incredible IDP day in that one there. The Brian Flores defense was just bringing pressure to Browning all day long. They were stopping the run. The Bengals can't run the ball at all, and they knew it. And so they could kind of, do whatever they wanted. Play action didn't work because no one was believing it. So it was just a disaster day for the Bengals and a brilliant day for that. He goes up against Aaron Rodgers. And as was pointed out by Andrew before, last year, Flores did do a number on Aaron Rodgers in London last year.
Yep.
They go back to London. Brian Flores can cook. We'll see what happens. This should be a fun game. Your thoughts on this game? Other thoughts on this game in the head-to-head matchup?
Yeah, I'm going to be on Minnesota, but I'm not going to feel good about it. I'm really not, because I think you're going to have to ask a little bit more of Carson Wentz in this spot. But I really like Jordan Mason. That. I think he's better than Aaron Jones. I think that's going to be a boost to the running game. And I think there is a higher level of competency baseline wise with Wentz than there is McCarthy. So yeah, we'll see. You have two really good head coaches going at it. I'm certainly not going to count out Mike Tomlin, but I guess I have enough concerns about the Steelers defense where, for one, the Vikings defense is the best unit in this game. I think we could agree on that. Mm-hmm. And then the Steelers defense just hasn't played well enough to me to count on slowing down Carson Wentz, which is a crazy sentence to say. But, this game being in Dublin, neutral site, it's going to be wacky.
Yeah. Derek Harmon did make his debut for the Steelers, and I think he made a little bit of a difference. I think that helps. But yeah, I agree. I'm going to be on the Vikings as well. Not going to feel super comfortable about that. Any other game you want to point out and any other thing you want to talk about before we get out of here?
Yeah, we did a good job of hitting most of it. I mean, we should mention Seattle just smacking the Saints. It kind of felt like the Saints had, we're cruising toward a game like this, right? Where it's like they played these two close games to begin the year. Now you head out on the road for the first time. And I think that went about as expected, but really impressive all-around performance from Seattle. Thought Sam Darnold looked really good again this week. We didn't really touch on Browns-Packers.
Right.
Bizarre game for a number of reasons, right? Like when you lose a game like this as Green Bay, so many things have to go wrong. The offensive line to me is the big concern coming out of this. Matt LaFleur was bad. Jordan Love had a horrible pick. There were just a lot of small things that I think kind of contributed to the Packers ultimately losing this game, but 14 penalties on Green Bay. Every single starting offensive lineman had basically the equivalent of an F grade at PFF. And, a lot of credit, of course, goes to Cleveland and that defensive line. But the offensive line for a long time has been at worst reliable and often a strength for Green Bay. I don't know if that's going to be the case this year. They're going to have to move some things around. They're going to have to address that as the year goes along. With that said, I don't think this is going to be the type of loss that changes the trajectory for the Packers. And if anything, maybe they needed something like this. You got basically your worst offensive lineman going to the media and saying, I think we could go 17-0. Yeah, I think it's in the cards. And then you go out and lose to the Browns. There were a lot of signs that I think this was going to be a slog for the Packers. I did not see them losing it straight up. That to me was shocking, but they put themselves in that position and ultimately got. With that said, they go to the Dallas Cowboys this week. I think this is a big bounce back spot for Green Bay. They get the Bengals at home the week after. So I think we'll look back at this as just one of the weirder results of the season. I don't think it changes how I view the Packers.
Baltimore last year went into Cleveland and lost. It can happen. I think this is, and I think Cleveland
lost to the Raiders last year.
I think it's exactly at home, no less in week 2. I think this is a write-off. I think this is one of those you move on from. I will watch the status of Aaron Banks and Zach Tom on that offensive line. I think there is a qualitative difference when they're out. I mean, they have depth, but you want that depth to be like a swing tackle. You want them to come in here and there, play a few snaps, not be required on to play every single down, let alone against Myles Garrett and company. I think
Jordan Morgan, who they took over Cooper DeJean, by the way, was the worst player in the NFL this past week. And that's looking like just a colossal bust of a pick so far. And we'll see. The Packers, some of these guys start slow and, they end up developing. I'm not closing the book on him, but that looks like a major miss on a first round pick, which Green Bay has been so good at hitting these second, third, fourth, fifth round picks and just bad overall in the first round. So maybe we shouldn't be surprised. I will mention Josh Jacobs, by the way, just because I think this is fantasy relevant and it goes hand in hand with the offensive line. Again, you got some good spots coming up. I think, Dallas and Cincinnati, those are 2 games you circle that should be big spots for Josh Jacobs, but it hasn't been good so far this year. Even those first 2 games they won, you're not seeing the explosives. You're not seeing the lanes that were there last year for Jacobs. 58 carries for 180 total yards so far.
And I think a lot of that's offensive line driven though. And no running back has gotten untracked against Cleveland yet. So
true.
The first one that does, and the next one that does will be the first one. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens again with the Browns against the Lions. That's a good matchup of strength versus strength there. So we'll see how that goes. All right, that's going to wrap up today's show in live stream. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks to our sponsors, Vivid Seats, RT Sports, and Chalkboard. We'll be back at you again next Tuesday. Tomorrow, I've got Dave Kluge from Football Guys going to join us to talk about Week 4 matchups and rankings. So tune in for that. That'll be at 1:30 Pacific tomorrow afternoon. Thanks for listening. Take care.